Empires, by pride and folly and extravagance, ruin themselves like individuals. That was Benjamin Franklin, but he wasn't romanticizing history. He was issuing a warning, because empires follow the same script. But this probably isn't the script you've heard before. It's not about overextension or debt or even manipulating the monetary system. Those are all symptoms. The real root cause, the real deadly disease: consolidate power, crush liberty, and the rest is history. And now it's our turn. This episode is a warning for the ages, the story of empires, because liberty must die for empires to live. But first of all, before getting to that, welcome, and thank you for joining me here on the Path to Liberty. My name is Michael Bolden with the 10th Amendment Center, and this is the show for Friday, June 20th, 2025. Let's kick it off. First, we really need to recognize the pattern, the structure of empires. Well, this is a breeding ground for centralized power, for consolidation, which is really incompatible with liberty. Over time, it all leads to an eventual collapse. And here's how Jean-Louis Delhomme put it. He said, thus, for instance, the total ruin of the Roman Republic was principally brought about by the exorbitant power to which several of its citizens were successively enabled to rise. And that's really the pattern. Centralize power, build empire, destroy liberty, and eventually come crumbling down. And Machiavelli, he showed us the inevitable steps as power grows and liberty gets attacked. He said the Romans continued their high-minded course so long as they enjoyed liberty. But when they submitted to the rule of emperors, and these emperors began to be corrupted, which I guess should be obvious that's going to happen, preferring the shade of the palace to the sun of the camp, then they also began to buy off the Parthians, the Germans, and other neighboring peoples, which was the beginning of the ruin of this great empire. These are some, but not all, these are some of the unhappy consequences of disarming the people. But that palace corruption Machiavelli described, it's no accident. And it's not just about bad people having power, and it can be solved by having good people hold a bunch of power. The issue is that it's structural, and the problems are virtually guaranteed. Here's how Thomas Gordon put it in Cato's Letters number 74. But in wide and overgrown empires, especially where all depends upon the will and care of one, especially, not in every situation, let his heart be ever so upright, 1,000 evils and injuries will be done, which he can never hear of, nor they who suffer them have the means of representing to him, and which probably are done or connived at by his own deputies, whom he employs to prevent or punish them. And there is so much in that one short paragraph from Thomas Gordon. Basically, it doesn't matter how awesome a person may be at the top of power if too much power is consolidated, especially over a huge territory. And even the people that good person may hire to protect your liberty or to prevent evils, you're still going to end up with 1,000 evils and injuries, which will be done. And once you understand this structural truth, well, Montesquieu saw where it all leads. Here he is in The Spirit of Laws. He said, empires, like men, must increase, decay, and be extinguished. But Montesquieu went further, and here's where I think it gets a bit personal for us, because he didn't just say, well, this is inevitable, it's going to happen. He actually had a solution, a way to kind of help prevent republics from devolving into great empires. Well, what you got to do is you got to keep them small. He said, it is natural for a republic to have only a small territory. Otherwise, it cannot long subsist. In an extensive republic, there are men of large fortunes, and consequently, of less moderation. There are trusts too considerable to be placed in any single subject. He has interests of his own. And here's the kicker. And it all sounds pretty familiar because this is part of human nature. It's a maxim of human nature. Power doesn't just expand. Absolute power doesn't just corrupt absolutely. Power draws the worst of the worst to wield that power. And here's how Montesquieu put it. He soon begins to think that he may be happy and glorious by oppressing his fellow citizens, and that he may raise himself to grandeur on the ruins of his country. Now, Montesquieu was widely read by the founding generation, was cited all throughout the ratification debates, and guess what? During those debates, people were paying attention and trying to warn us about this. For example, the anti-federalist writer Cato, in his third essay, he saw Montesquieu's warnings playing out in real time. He said, whoever seriously considers the immense extent of territory comprehended within the limits of the United States, together with the variety of its climates, productions, and commerce, the difference of extent and number of inhabitants in all, the dissimilitude of interest, morals, and politics in almost every one. And if you think about the United States of today, California is a completely different country from, for example, let's say South Carolina, and vice versa. There is a huge dissimilitude in the interests, morals, and politics from state to state throughout the United States, and especially in some extremes. Well, anyways, Cato continued, we'll receive it once you learn all this, you'll receive it as an intuitive truth that a consolidated republican form of government therein can never, and this will sound familiar, form a perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to you and your posterity. He was saying, no way. And that was at that point when it was much smaller. At that point, Cato saying there's not a chance that this system can secure the blessings of liberty to you and your posterity, us. Now, it wasn't just the anti-federalists. On the federalist side, you have people like John Dickinson, the penman of the Revolution, the lead author of the Articles of Confederation, and a leading Federalist advocate for ratification of the Constitution. He warned us in 1788, writing in his Fabius Letters, number 7, he warned us about the thirst of empire. He said, this is a vice that ever has been, and from the nature of things, ever must be, fatal to republican forms of government. And I think the pattern is clear, but the actual mechanism of how this all plays out, how does an empire strangle liberty? I think it's in one word, consolidation. And consolidation to the founding generation is centralizing all power in one place. Here's how Thomas Jefferson put it in a letter to Joseph C. Cabell. All of these source documents will be linked to in the show notes. I just want to quickly mention Alan Mosley will get that organized, and I'll get it published over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. It's all spelled out a couple of hours after this live stream is done. But here's Jefferson in 1816. He said, what has destroyed liberty and the rights of man in every government which has ever existed under the sun? The generalizing and concentrating of all cares and powers into one body. Not some governments, there's a little Jeffersonian flair here. Not some, but all of them. The destruction of liberty is about generalizing and concentrating all cares and powers into one body. He said, no matter whether the autocrats of Russia or France or of the aristocrats of a Venetian Senate. And when you really get down to it, the increase of power, the centralized power, the consolidation, it doesn't just destroy liberty, and that's bad enough, but it really brings about the collapse of the empire itself. And back to Gordon in Cato's letters, he said the increased power is, no doubt, the maxim of these princes, but their practice generally contradicts it. While they lessen their people and their wealth to enlarge their territory, every addition of this kind being an addition to their weakness as they continue. So it's the centralization of power. They're trying to expand their power both in what they can do, but also in their geographical reach. And this is where The overextension and the debt become symptoms of this deadly disease, and therefore brings the whole system down. Anyways, Gordon continued, and therefore great empires, from the moment they are at their height, are in a continual decay. The decay and discouragement of the people being the unnatural means of their first growth, and indeed their increase contained in it, and carried along with it certain seeds of decrease and desolation. Learning these maxims from history about power and human nature, I think it becomes pretty easy to understand why Patrick Henry so vehemently warned about the dangers of consolidation repeatedly throughout the summer of 1788, especially during the Virginia Ratifying Convention. Here, for example, he said, "Dangers are to be apprehended in whatever manner we proceed, but those of a consolidation are the most destructive. The worst thing that could happen is consolidation of power," to Patrick Henry. He also said that consolidation not might, not could, not most likely, but is guaranteed to end in the destruction of our liberties. Now, all this, it doesn't mean that it's going to happen fast, obviously. And Vattel explained that empires play the long game. He wrote, "A powerful state may support itself for some time by its own weight, but at length it falls into decay. And this is perhaps one of the principal causes of those revolutions observable in great empires." And James Otis Jr., writing as Freeborn American, 1767, he also understood that this always took a long time. Again, empires play the long game for power and control and then eventual collapse. James Otis said, "A free government," I know that probably sounds like an oxymoron, but that's not how they're using it. Anyways, well, that'll be another episode, I guess. "A free government," wrote James Otis, "never degenerated into tyranny all at once. It is the work of years." Now back to the anti-federalists during the ratification debate. Brutus, in his first essay, well, he gave us all kinds of warning signs to keep an eye out for. Basically, the stuff that plays out when your republic is too large and probably turning into a tyrannical empire. And I think a lot of this stuff should sound familiar to all of us through our entire lives. He said, "In so extensive a republic, the great officers of government would soon become above the control of the people and abuse their power to the purpose of aggrandizing themselves and oppressing them." And Brutus, in that same first essay, I believe this was October of 1787, one of the first anti-federalist essays that came out. A quick aside, everyone, Federalist and anti-Federalist, they were all on board with the idea that consolidation would destroy liberty. No one was arguing against that. Well, I mean, maybe a handful, but not really. It wasn't very prominent. Basically, all across the spectrum, they were on board with the message that consolidation would destroy liberty. The debate was really whether or not the system would lead to a consolidated government. And of course, the Federalists said, no, it's not. And the Anti-Federalists said, absolutely, this is what's going to happen. But very few people, if any, really explained why consolidation was bad, because it was so widely understood that it was bad that it didn't even need to be explained. But Brutus really is one of the few who went into some detail, and he gave us a laundry list of what happens in a consolidated system. And I covered that in some detail in an old episode, almost 5 years old, The Dangers of Consolidation, Anti-Federalist Brutus #1. Here are some bullet points from that episode. The more centralized or consolidated the system, the more it leads to an abuse of power, law being nothing more than the will of the people in power, what Thomas Jefferson later called the tyrant's will. You're going to have factions and infighting. And then to enforce everything, you're going to have standing armies, permanent military force, rather than a government based on consent. Again, The Dangers of Consolidation, Anti-Federalist Brutus #1, that will be linked to in the show notes over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path to liberty. And basically, as Brutus warned, you'd end up with a government based on coercion and force, not voluntary consent. And the standing army would be the tool they use to enforce their will. Here from the works of Tacitus, we see this goes back all the way to the ancients. Rome itself perished by her conquests, which being made by great armies, occasioned such power and insolence in their commanders, and set some citizens so high above the rest, an inequality pernicious to free states, that she was enslaved by ingrates whom she had employed to defend her. Rome vanquished foreign nations. Foreign luxury debauched Rome. And traitorous citizens seized upon their mother with all her acquisitions. So if you want empire, you're going to have to find a way to enforce it, and that means a massive militarized force. And John Trenchard put it like this: great empires cannot subsist without great armies, and liberty cannot subsist with them. Man, that is awesome stuff. Anyways, he continued, as armies long kept up and grown part of the government will soon engross the whole government and can never be disbanded, so liberty long lost can never be recovered. And as James Madison made so clear, it all goes back to the warfare state, the foundation of empires. He said, of all the enemies to public liberty, war is, perhaps, the most to be dreaded, because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. War, said Madison, is the parent of armies. From these proceed debts and taxes. But wait, there is more. He said, and armies and debts and taxes are the known instruments for bringing the many under the domination of the few. And for people like Patrick Henry and so many others, the choice is clear. Same for me. It's either liberty or empire. You can't have both. And here he is in the Virginia Ratifying Convention. Patrick Henry said, if we admit this consolidated government, it will be because we like a great, splendid one. Some way or other, we must be a great and mighty empire. We must have an army and a navy and a number of things. But again, it's either liberty or empire. And he lamented the fact that it used to be a goal of liberty only. He said, when the American spirit was in its youth, the language of America was different. Liberty, sir, was then the primary object. And that ultimately is our choice again today. It's liberty or empire. But because of the government-run and government-approved so-called education system, none of us ever learned that this even is an option, that this is even something to consider. And, well, that's a big part of the reason why we work so hard on this. All the way back when we were launched in June of 2006, my goal when I registered 10thamendmentcenter.com was to just reach and teach just one person, a handful of people, about these essential foundational principles from the founders, the old revolutionaries, the great people that they read and learned from, about the Constitution and how to enforce it. And we've definitely achieved that goal. We've gone way beyond it, but we're still scratching the surface. But our goal is to reach and teach more and more people about this day in and day out, month in and month out, and now 19 years, year in and year out. I can hardly believe we're already here, but I'm so grateful for all the support you guys have given us to get us to this point. And if you want to help us continue this work and build upon it, nothing can help us do this work more than the financial faith and support of our members. If you got a couple of bucks of that quickly devaluing dirty government fiat, please consider throwing it our way over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. It's all spelled out, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. Our membership program starts out at just $2 a month. We also have annual, 5-year, and lifetime options. Again, 10thamendmentcenter.com/members. And if you don't want to become a member but still want to help us out financially, that is super awesome, and I'm very grateful for your consideration. Or if you already are a member, thank you, first of all. I can't say that enough. But if you want to pitch in more, and I know I've had a number of people, they always are asking, where can I do that again? So here's the link, 10thamendmentcenter.com/donate for a one-time financial gift to help us commemorate our 19-year anniversary, kick off year 20 and beyond. Thank you so much. Of course, there's a number of free and easy peasy things you can do to help us spread the word. Of course, subscribe, get notifications, hit the like button, leave reviews on Apple Podcasts or any podcast platform. Watch time percentage. If you watch it 100% of the video, that's great. 150, 200, 300%, that's way more. It tells that algo to send us out to more people. I'm very grateful for all of your help in spreading the word. I'm grateful for you spending some of your time with me today. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope it was interesting. I hope it was a little entertaining here and there. But more important than anything, I hope it made you think, and I hope you learned something. Again, thank you so much for spending some of your time with me today. I hope you have an awesome weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next week here on the path to liberty.